curt statements that people had disagreed with her, and somehow this disagreement represented a horrible attack on her authentic position, as if somehow the claim that you're emotionally attached to an idea ring-fenced it, as you put it, from critique. I think we see that quite a lot, and I think you can see manifestations of that kind of emotivist sort of argument all over our politics. You can't offend me. That offends me, what you've just said. And the fact that we disagree and you've challenged me is in some sense ought to be, in some people's view, criminal, socially sanctioned, not acceptable. I think behind the broader discourse of offence that you find a lot, there lies a wee kernel of this idea, of this emotivist idea of politics, actually.
Yeah, I suppose the worst one for it, I suppose, was Blair, who just used to send me from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Because when someone asked him a difficult question, you know, sometimes when he did some of those interviews before Iraq, obviously with a hand-picked Newsnight audience, but so on, but he just used to infuriate me with the way that he would respond to a difficult question, which was one of two ways. Oh, come on now. So that's not very fair, is it? You know, Mr. Blair, why are you invading Iraq illegally? Oh, come on now. You're just being unfair. You're just being obstructive. Let's try and have a real debate. That was a classic. And the other one was, well, we may disagree, but you must admit I'm an honest and fair person, and this is my genuine belief. And he used to do that kind of narrative all the time. You're right, and it does come up, and that used to just drive me so mad, because no, I don't believe you're honest, and I don't believe you're fair. I'm sorry.
And it came up again, remember, about the sort of Thatcher thing. I think we discussed that at the time. There was a very strange idea going around, quite widely distributed in commenters and commentators in the press, that, well, she really believed what she did. So even if she was a kind of astonishingly awful politician with very bad ideas, it was somehow better that she inflicted them on people sincerely than insincerely. And I think that gestures again towards the idea that sincerity is somehow treated as if it's of independent significance, as if it somehow has moral good and moral value, whatever one is being sincere about, which I think is really very worrying, which goes against what I was saying, I suppose, about the importance or the value of profoundly held emotional attachments for our politics. I'm very conflicted about it, actually.
Yeah. To avoid running foul of Godwin's law, I wouldn't mention that one, but you could say that Franco certainly believed in what he was doing. Does it make him a better politician than someone else? No, probably not.
No.
While we're on emotive subjects, did you catch Dougie Doug this week?
Yes, I'm a dab hand with a nose. Didn't he take any keech and all that kind of stuff? Yes, imagine this is. I'm going to be very ungenerous about this, uncharacteristically. I did see that, and I thought there is an analog strategy for a digital world. I mean, there was a funny. Someone tweeted the folk at National Collective must have their head in their hands with all of their kind of verve, contemporary appearance, and you get a sketched wee Doug. Yeah, my heart sinks, to be honest. The idea is not to be ungenerous about it, but it's just so amateurish and thin and charmless and old-fashioned and kind of cringy. A wee tartan Scotty dog. Yeah, I was not overwhelmed with joy when I saw Dougie Doug, particularly because his name is totally uninspired.
Yeah, although I did see something to lighten the heart along the lines of cartoons this week, and that's the fact that the new Asterix books will be set in Scotland. I've always been a big fan, and not only will it be set in Scotland, but it's going to be pro-indie as well. It's Asterix and the Picts.
No, I was always when I was a wee boy, I used to love them as well. And it was all about Cleopatra's nose, wasn't it? And it was the Britons, I seem to remember when I was a kid, which was all about having cups of tea and lamb with mint. That was my basic primer on English culture, actually. I read that before I came down here.
Is that why you went down there?
To have the cup of tea and the lamb with mint.
Yeah,
it was, exactly. I'm basically like an Obelix figure down here. I did see the cover of the new Asterix thing, which has the poor Obelix rejoicing in a plaid as the irreverent little Asterix chortles at his expense. Yeah, it was splendid. I mean, I always loved them when I was a kid, though, as we were saying before we came on air, you were saying that it's a rich kind of seam of kind of more adult humour and jokes and connotations than maybe my wee 10-year-old self really noticed when I was reading them the first time.
Yeah, there's always been a lot in there, and I've always hoped that, one day they would do a Scotland one, because they never had. There's Asterix in Corsica, Asterix in Spain, Asterix in Belgium, and there's never been that Scotland one, so there will be, so I think that's quite good.
Yes, it's funny. I don't know when it would be set, sort of around. I'm trying to remember now. My Roman history. What was it? The Battle of Mons Gropius or something. That's maybe a bit outside the time, isn't it? If it's around Julius Caesar, maybe it's because the Romans didn't get far enough, so they couldn't have the usual, sort of Roman bashing with menhirs and things like that.
Yeah.
If only the Romans had taken over Scotland, you'd have had your book much earlier.
Yeah, because they could put in the kind of construction of Hadrian's Wall and that sort of stuff. Because it would be interesting from the point of view of the Asterix world, because all the other places that they go to have actually been conquered by the Romans, but Scotland never was. So
That's true. And so they echo their own independent spirit. I don't know if we've got a druid, possibly.
Oh, so what's the magic potion? It's got to be whiskey.
Oh, yes, one can but hope. I'll have to have a look out for that. I'm sure I've got my old ones hiding somewhere. I'll have to dig them out and dip back into a series of sometimes not entirely politically correct ethnic and national cliches.
Okay, so on the subject of magic potion, we'll go to a group of people that I think are going to need a bit more than that, which is the Scottish Labour Party, who've done a bit of a reshuffle. And Ian Gray's been rewarded for his resounding success in the past by being promoted. And Jackie Bailey's going to turn her attention to social justice. That's a bad lookout for social justice, I think. So they've changed their very, very, very shadow cabinet, Andrew. What do you think this is going to turn their fortunes around?
Do I? I think it's actually, although it's easy to have a partisan gloat about Ian Gray's promotion back to the front line of Labour politics, and he remains not one of life's more electrifying figures. Let's be blunt about that. But he cannot be worse than the totally ineffectual Ken McIntosh. So I think actually it's a good move by Lamont in that respect. I blogged a wee bit about the folk who she has promoted, which includes Graham Pearson, who was former head of the Scottish Crime and Drug Enforcement Agency for the Justice Brief. And because we think about justice in Scottish politics at the moment, I'm afraid, almost entirely through criminal eyes, he's an interesting pick for the role, and I think you better look out. He's been critical about the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act throughout, so his promotion may well turn that into more of a political topic than it has been. Labour's been quite diffident about it, but he hasn't, so that's someone to look out for. For me, the funniest one was Neil Findlay, who was elected third in the Lothians list in 2011, largely because his party got gubbed in the rest of the Lothians. He's always styled as a left winger. And largely specialises in winding up Mike Russell. And he's been appointed Health Secretary, Shadow, which I think is interesting and maybe tells you how they think about Alex Neil, who's currently the Health Secretary for the SNP and used to be in the Labour Party, actually. An Ayrsham and minor son, he's kind of got lefty credentials. So I think there may be an attempt to outflank him on the left with Neil Findlay. But I think also Neil Findlay is he's not a measured quantity yet, and he may well crash and burn and sit rather interestingly beside Lamont's broader policies, which have tended to tack more towards the right, I would argue, in terms of an attitude to universality.
Yeah, and this is why I'm not convinced it's going to do a lot of good for them, because think of the debacle recently where they came up with this idea for having maybe some more devolved powers. And then it was publicised, it was broadcast, and then suddenly the word comes from Labour London, no, shut up about that, you're not going to mention that again, drop it immediately. And so it doesn't really, to me, it's not convincing that there's going to be real change, because the next time they come up with any kind of different policy, or any policy that might indeed be a winner, if it doesn't go with Labour London, then down it goes. I can't see how this is really going to turn their fortunes around so much. It might make some sort of difference in good publicity if these new people speak well, put on a good show, but then the next time the next major policy division with London comes around, it's back to the same old. They just get slapped down again. I mean, in certain sense, Scottish Labour is just a front for UK Labour.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not so sure what I think about that. I think, well, Rev Stu at Wings Over Scotland described this as shuffling the dreck, which was generous of him. I think that probably is not exactly fair. I mean, many of the people who have been promoted are actually quite interesting folk. You know, accidental elected people. They're not the usual kind of characters, and I'm not saying it will transform their fortunes. I don't think that's problematic. I mean, it's going to be difficult for them anyway. But I actually think for me, it looks a bit more formidable, more interesting a group of spokespersons than we've seen before from the Labour Party, and given their limited and depleted personnel. So I don't feel sort of too gloaty about it. I think, well, like Kezia Dugdale, who I don't know, but who was kind of around Edinburgh Uni when I was there. It seems smart. Sure, she's a partisan, but she's a politician. What do you expect? So I think it has the possibility to prove quite interesting, this reshuffle, now that your Jackie Baileys are out of the way and things like that. So I'm not so sure about that.
Well, I know I'm not convinced. I understand that it might provide a livening somewhat of the Scottish Labour front benches, but then, just to repeat it, as soon as they get slapped down again, then any kind of vitality that they seem to have gained just goes out the window. Even the new group just look bad. It's as simple as that.
Well, I think there's a point which I made on the blog, and folk can read it there. But the funny thing is that all of these people that she's appointed to very prominent roles in the Labour Party actually were accidental MSPs in general terms, and tended to come in on the back of being defeated in lots of constituencies, and the Labour Party not really caring much about who is third placed on their list in the Lothians. On one level, that's all grand and is interesting. But on another level, it means, well, what are they going to do in 2016? How are they going to get these front bench people, these front bench spokespersons, if they become prominent in the public eye? If they become the government in waiting, then they're going to have to find a way of getting their health secretary, their justice secretary, their youth employment secretary, yada yada yada. They're going to have to try and get these people re-elected, and that isn't going to be easy, because in the sense that in every constituency you have some ambitious, unionist or political would-be, or the outgoing MSP that maybe wants to come back after having been defeated in 2011. I think there's an argument that this reshuffle will turn Scottish Labour potentially into a bag of ferrets right up into 2016, and that assumes that we don't win the referendum. But if we do, then, as some folk have pointed out, you'll have all of these MPs from the Westminster representing Scottish constituencies, many of whom, understandably, will be interested in finding work with the party of which they're a member north of the border. And heaven knows what that would do to the party and to kind of strategy going into 2016, whether that's for an independent Scotland's Parliament or Holyrood as a devolved assembly.
But then if you think of Labour, the overall organisation, there's an inherent weakness for them in Scotland, although you're suggesting there could be a kind of repatriation is the wrong word, but imagine some of these new people that they've put forward do brilliantly well. They astound everyone. It all goes fantastic. Where do they get sent?
Well,
they go to London, and Scottish Labour again looks impotent and weak.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, I suppose. I think the ones to watch out for are, for me, particularly Graham Pearson, because he has aspects of kind of liberalism. When you were talking about the offensive behaviour at football bill when it was going through Parliament in 2011, he said essentially, as an ex-copper, we shouldn't listen necessarily to what the police always want more power. And it isn't just the role of a parliament to rubber stamp whatever the police demand, which, to be honest, is a terribly refreshing thought to hear anybody say.
I was very happy indeed when he said that. I'll give him that.
Yeah, and we'll see whether his gestures towards liberalism in some respects survive the rigours of being an opposition spokesman. Maybe they won't, and one example of that from this week was the fact that he endorsed the idea of prisoners on short-term sentences voting in Holyrood initially a few months ago, and then this week on the bill, which went through, he voted not to give prisoners the vote. He voted against all those amendments. So I think he will find himself, even if he has these impulses, under quite a lot of pressure from Labour's traditional authoritarian attitude towards criminal justice. And actually, I think just for the politics of it, Neil Finlay's going to be the interesting one as well, because of his kind of left-winger tag. It'll be clear that there'll be an attempt, I would have thought, to sort of have a go at health policy from that perspective, and that will firstly wind up lots of Scottish nationalists that like to think of the Labour Party as having collapsed into a sort of right wing vision. So I think he's gonna irritate a lot.
But that's only going to work if Joanne Lamont with her right wing strategy shuts up, which I don't think